So now I'm speaking to the people who are joining by the live stream. This is David Cashman, SEB Housing. This is the information session for the affordable units at the Edison and Waltham. I was just telling the folks who are attending by phone, we are doing this both by live stream on YouTube and also by conference call. So I will do my best to kind of answer questions from folks and present to people who are attending by both avenues. It's just 6:30 right now. That's our start time. I'm going to just give it another minute to see if anyone else joins us, and then we'll get started. For the folks who are joining us by live stream, you'll see that to the right of the video screen where you see me, there's a live chat box. Feel free to type in questions there. If you have any, you can type them in at any time, and I will pause and try and answer your questions. And as I said before, for the folks attending by conference call, at any time, if you have a question, let me know, and I will be happy to answer it. Just for the folks going back here, for the folks who are attending by live stream, I think there is also an option to type below the screen where you see me. That's a comment section, and I cannot see what you write there. So please do not put any questions there because I won't see them. Again, make sure you put them to the right of the screen where you see me. And in fact, if any of the three people who are attending by live stream, if someone just wants to write anything hello right now, just so I can see that it's working, that would be helpful. I don't see anyone's typed anything yet.
I'm actually doing both. Hi, David. Gail, David, I'm on the phone.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually doing both, but
okay.
I'm doing both, but I have problems with my internet. Do you want me to type something in?
No, it looks like we've got a couple people, Bruce and the Edison team. So great. This is working. So thank you. Okay. Thanks everyone for being flexible. These are obviously difficult times, and we're kind of doing our best. As you can see, I'm sitting here in my spare bedroom, not your kind of typical background for something like this, but this is the best I got right now. So this is the information session for the Edison Apartments in Waltham. This is a great opportunity for households who are looking to live in Waltham, which is obviously a desirable community at rental prices in a brand new, beautiful development at prices that are far below what they would be on the market. Affordable housing means different things to different people. So let's just start by saying in this program, affordable housing does not mean that it's that rents are tied to your particular financial situation. It doesn't mean Section 8, subsidized, etc. What it means is that these 26 units are being offered at rental prices that are below what they would be on the market rate, and they are being offered to households who meet certain eligibility requirements. One of the chief requirements of which is that you don't make too much money. There's an income limit that applies to everyone who wants to be part of this program. At the same time, anyone who wants to move forward, and we'll talk about this more later, has to also have enough in income and assets to show that they can support the rent themselves. Okay, so one way to think about it caters to a slice of the population that, if you think of this, I'm just sort of holding my hand up as an income ceiling. You have to be below the income ceiling. That's the program required income ceiling. Anyone who makes more than that isn't eligible. But also we have this floor. You have to make enough so that you can support the rent on your own. Now, we'll talk a little bit later. If you do have a voucher, you can use that well, there's no restriction against using it by the program anyway. So that floor isn't as applicable if you are someone that has a voucher. But for everyone else, you do need to fit within that window. So below the ceiling and above that, you can actually support the rents. One thing I would say, I just spent a little time today. This property is a great website. So if you haven't already, encourage you to just Google the Edison, take a look. There's a lot of photos on there, a lot of information on there about the units themselves, which look beautiful, really high ceilings. I was noticing kind of beautiful white with black trim, open floor plans. And great amenities as well, right near the Charles River, close to a lot of great restaurants and things that are going on in Waltham. I think it's very commuter friendly. So again, the website can give you a much better kind of description than I can here, but it looks like a really, really nice property and a great place to live. In total, there are 264 units at this development. 26 of them are going to be made available through this process. Those units break down among 1 and 2 bedroom units. There are 17 one-bedroom units and 9 two-bedroom units. There are also a number of units built out for persons with mobility impairments among those 26 units. The one-bedroom units have 1 bathroom, and range from sort of low 700 square feet to mid 900 square feet. The 2 bedrooms are in the range of about 1,080 square feet to 1,164 square feet. The rents, the monthly rents for a 1 bedroom are $1,597, and the 2 bedroom rents are $1,764. In case you're wondering where those numbers come from, those numbers are tied to the area median income that HUD publishes each year, usually in April. So what that means is that rents fluctuate each year. Not a lot, usually not a lot, but they do fluctuate a little bit depending on the numbers that HUD releases. As well, it's important to note that those rents do not include a number of utilities. Those are at this property gas heat, gas water heating, cooking, electricity, water, and sewer. However, 1 bedroom units do get 1 free parking space, and 2 bedroom units holders do get 2 free parking spaces. And again, there is easy access to public transportation nearby. Any questions so far? Please feel free to shout them out. And again, yep, go ahead.
Can you go over the utility again? I didn't understand that one.
Yeah, so the question from the caller is about utilities. So I was just saying that your net rent does not include utilities. So you are responsible for your utility payments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. So, and again, I actually probably should have said this at the beginning, and I'm sorry I didn't mention it. If you haven't already, our website, you can type in www.sebhousing.com, and on there you can find this particular development and the information packet and application if you don't already have access to them. So that's just a good resource, and if you want to bring that up now, you can kind of follow along or poke through as we talk about this program. Income limits, what are they? So for a 1-person household, you're allowed to make up to $62,450. 2-person household, $71,400. A 3-person household can make up to $80,300, and a 4-person household can make up to $89,200. That is your gross income. And income in this program, I should tell you, is defined expansively, and that is per the program rules. That's not something that we, SEB Housing, make up. That is what is required. So it's just important to keep in mind that we may have to count certain things as income that most people don't necessarily think of as income. When you hear income, most people think just what's the income you get from a job. But in this particular program, there can be other income sources that are not the sort of typical ones that we think about. So just by way of example, some people maybe are getting alimony or child support. That's income. Maybe some people have a parent or uncle or someone who gives them money each month for whatever the case may be. That's income under this program. It's not something that most people think of as income, but it is in this program. If you have a little side job selling things, online or whatever the case may be, well, the proceeds that you bring in, that's income. So I just want to put that out there now because it's important that you understand that that's what the program requires. And if you apply, we're going to for all of those things. And that's not to make your life difficult. It's just that's what the program requires of us. Just scrolling down here. When we are, I'll get to this later on when we talk about the lottery. Another thing to keep in mind is you can't own a home when you move in. So if there's anyone that owns a home, you do have to sell it before you would be allowed to rent a unit at the Edison. And lastly, a household can't have a financial interest in the development. That's not something that comes up often. If you're related to the developer or something like that, unfortunately, that would preclude you from moving forward in this program. So that's a bit about that income ceiling that we talked about at the beginning. Those are the specific income limits. And as I've said, income is defined expansively by program rules. And therefore, when you submit an application, you're going to find that we ask about a lot of different types of income sources. As I had also said, there's that sort of income floor. Now, that is not a program requirement. That's just a reflection of the fact that in this program, households need to be able to support the rent. Just by way of example, if someone made $10,000 a year and they were a 1-person household, they would qualify by the program rules because they'd be way under that $62,450 income limit that we discussed. But someone who makes $10,000 and doesn't have a subsidy like a voucher would never be able to support the rent on their own. And ultimately, when it came time to leasing a unit, they would get rejected because there's no way they could afford the rent. So recognizing that, we work with the property and we do screen, not nearly as rigorously, but we do take a look when you're applying for the lottery to make sure that you have enough. What does that look like specifically? Well, unlike the income limits, which are tied to the number of persons who are applying, the minimum incomes reflect the number of bedrooms that you're applying for. So specifically what that means is if you're applying for a 1-bedroom unit, you have to make about $57,000 to be able to support that 1-bedroom rent. And if you're applying for a 2-bedroom unit, you have to make about $63,000 to be able to support that rent. Again, as this is not a program requirement, we are not screening super closely for this. So if you're close, we will say that is good enough for us. Also, it says minimum income in the information packet. Really, it should say minimum income in assets, because even if you, for example, are applying for a 1-bedroom unit and you don't quite have, or you don't quite make $57,000 a year, but you have a lot put away in assets, that's also okay, because you could draw down on those assets to make up the deficiency. But again, this is just, we do this because it's to nobody's benefit, including your own, for us to say, yes, you qualify for the program, you're well under the income limits, when at the end of the day, we know that ultimately, in applying for a unit, the property would tell you that you don't make enough. That doesn't do anyone any good. We do also ask in the application about a lot of the different assets you have. The most common ones probably are bank accounts and the like, savings, checkings. There's no asset limit. So, you could have a lot tucked away in a savings account. That's not going to make you ineligible for this program. Now, the one caveat to be aware of is that we do have to add to your income any actual income that's generated from your assets, or an imputed amount, which is 0.06%, whichever of those is higher. This rarely, I think, is an issue for households unless they're really close, really close to the income limit. And this sort of actual or imputed income from assets could be enough to bump them up over the income limit. But in most cases, it's not something that comes up. So I don't think it's worth spending a ton of time on this evening, other than just to say that there is no asset limit, but we do have to look at the income that's generated from your assets. And in most cases, it's not an issue for folks. We give an example in the info pack as well, so you can take a look at that. That's on page 6 of the information packet, just so you can see what that might look like in an actual example. One issue that does come up, people ask if they can't qualify for a unit on their own, can they have a cosigner? The answer to that is no. The program just does not allow that. You also do not have to be a resident of Waltham to apply. We'll talk in a little bit about, there is a priority for people who live and work in Waltham as against people who do not, but that does not mean that people who don't live or work in Waltham can't apply. They absolutely can. So I've been talking a little bit about some of the income limits and some of the requirements. One of the ways to think about that is sort of the first step in this process. You're going to fill out an application if you're interested. You have until April 27th to do so. I cannot stress enough that if you are interested and you want to apply, do so early, because the vast majority of households don't submit a 100% complete application on the first try. And it takes them several tries to complete it to the point where it's totally done. You don't want to be waiting until late April to submit your application, because chances are, something's going to be missing, or something's going to be require additional explanation, and you don't want to be scrambling in that last week to find those documents. So give yourself plenty of time. That's not necessarily an invitation to submit an application that is wildly incomplete, but earlier is absolutely better. There's no harm in getting it in early and giving yourself time to then go get anything that is missing. Now, I will say on this front, we do understand and fully appreciate that given everything that's going on with the coronavirus, certain of the documents that we typically have to ask for and that we do ask for may be difficult to get. We get that. We will work with you if there is something that you're having trouble getting because the business is closed or whatever the case may be. We will do everything we can to work with you. I see a question here from Bruce Springsteen. Love that. Good name. What if you make $57,000, but your wife died and her teacher pension is $600 per month? Does that disqualify me for going a little over? So you'd be, well, I'm sorry to hear about that, first of all. My condolences. So I take it from that you are the recipient now of that $600 per month in addition to the $57,000 that you make, Bruce? Don't see a response yet, Bruce, but and I want to just kind of keep moving. So let me just answer it by saying, hard for me to say, taking a look at exactly. It sounds like it might. I'm always hesitant to tell someone without actually looking at their application that yes, you're over. So I would still encourage you to apply. It sounds like it would be close. I don't know if there's some way that we might be able to recategorize the $600 per month, and I can follow up with you on that once this is done. But I would still encourage you to apply. And why don't you send me an email, Bruce, at david@sebhousing.com, and I will follow up with you specifically on this, because that's a pretty specific issue that probably most people won't be facing. So please email me that question again, david@sebhousing.com, and I will follow up with you on that question. So folks, just going back, we were talking about this as the first step in the process. Get your application in early. When you apply, you can apply for a 1-bedroom and or a 2-bedroom. And if you think you could be happy in either, I strongly recommend that you apply for both. There's absolutely no downside to applying for both. And you could qualify for both and be on the waiting list for both. The only way you won't have the opportunity to move forward with a certain bedroom type is if you don't apply for it. So on one of those very first pages of your application, if you think you could be interested in both, check them both off. It's not going to disadvantage you in any way whatsoever. You will also, on one of those very first pages of your application, you'll indicate the household type that you are. This is something that we talk about a little bit on page 7 of the information packet. And this goes to giving priority to certain households. In a nutshell, what this means is we break down households into type 2 and type 1 households. Type 2 households are households that by program rules would need 2 bedrooms. So this is any household that has 3 or 4 persons, or say a couple that has a child. By program rules, those are households that need 2 bedrooms. Conversely, a single person applying doesn't need 2 bedrooms. They might like 2 bedrooms, they might want 2 bedrooms, but they don't need 2 bedrooms. What that means when we run the lottery is that all type 2 households will get priority over all type 1 households for 2-bedroom units. And when we talk about how we run the lottery in just a minute here, I'll get into that a little bit further. So when you apply for the program, and if you are eligible, you will get a lottery number. The lottery number is going to be in the form of A dot blank blank blank. It'll be a number. We'll say A.001 or A.005. Those are nothing more than anonymous identifiers. The order in which you submit your application or the specific number that you get has absolutely no bearing on your kind of status or priority moving forward. Again, it is just an anonymous identifier. When you get that number, if you show up on the night of the lottery, we will put all of the box and draw them out. The order that we draw them does not necessarily reflect the order that households will get to move forward, because we do have to implement certain priorities. So once the lottery is over, we will go back to the office. We will shuffle or sort those results, and we will create waiting lists, which we will send to you that very same night. Those waiting lists, when we send them to you, will just have your lottery number. And it's those waiting lists that determine the order that households will get to move forward in applying for units. So what does that mean? I was just talking a little bit earlier about household types, household type 1, household type 2. So just specifically, if house 001 is a single person, they're a type 1 household, and they are drawn very first in the lottery, and they said and they applied for a 2-bedroom unit, they're not going to be first on the 2-bedroom waiting list, because every household who's a type 2 household who needs 2-bedroom is going to leapfrog them on those waiting lists and get to move forward ahead of them. But on the other hand, a type 1 household has equal footing and equal priority for a 1-bedroom unit. So a type 2 household that applies for a 1-bedroom unit would not leapfrog that type 1 household for a 1-bedroom unit. But again, we will sort the lottery drawing results that very same night. We'll send you the waiting lists, and those waiting lists will determine the order that households will get to move forward. Another important point on this front is that these lotteries that we run are not like most lotteries in sort of the traditional sense, or what people think of, lottery winners and lottery losers, and only a certain number of households get picked and too bad for everyone else. That is not how this works. Rather, every household who submits an application, who is eligible, who gets their lottery number, A.00 whatever, who's entered and picked in the lottery, will have a position on one or several waiting lists for the units that they applied for. Now, you may not be the first on the waiting list, but you will have a position on the waiting list. So no one's a winner and no one's a loser. Some people just get to move forward ahead of others. Now, even if you are not one of the very, very top households on a waiting list, that doesn't necessarily mean that you will not get an opportunity, because it happens all the time that households ahead of you may not move forward for one reason or another. Sometimes, and we see this all the time, households, they may just decide that this isn't the right opportunity for them. Some life event may come up and they may, move. Or conversely, maybe they go and apply for a unit and they're not eligible. They're not eligible because they don't meet the leasing office's screening criteria. So point is to say, if on the night of the lottery we send you the waiting list and you don't have the exact position, the number 1 slot that you were hoping for, please don't despair, because that doesn't necessarily mean that you are sort of out of it, or that your chance came and went. It just means that there's some households ahead of you that are going to get to move forward or be given the opportunity to move forward before you will. Now, by that same token, if you are a household who has the very first position on a waiting list, that's great, good for you, but that's not the end of the story, because you still need to apply for a lease and meet the lease screening criteria. We, SEB Housing, are just screening you to see if you meet the requirements of the affordable housing program. But we're not looking at any of the factors, or very few of the factors, that the leasing office might look at to see if a person is lease eligible. So we are not, we in the lottery is not the last step. When households from the lottery apply for leases, you're going to be put through the same lease screening criteria that anyone is. So just by way of example, if someone who's eligible for the program gets a top a waiting list position, but they've got horrible recent credit, they may not be lease eligible. and they may not get the opportunity to move forward in leasing a unit. So that's really important to keep in mind. We, SEB Housing, are kind of the first step in making sure that households are program eligible. We'll run the lottery, we'll create the waiting list, and we'll send them to you that night. The next step in the process is you have to work with the leasing office in applying for a lease and being screened to make sure that you are lease eligible. And most likely, because there probably will be a lot of households who are in the lottery and apply, there will be deadlines. Having a top waiting list position is not reason to just kind of twiddle your thumbs and take 2 months to lease a unit. You have to move forward relatively quickly to be fair to the households that are behind you on the waiting list. Another important point on this front is if and when your time comes to move forward in leasing a unit, you'll be invited in by the leasing office. You'll apply for a lease. If you're eligible, you will then be given the opportunity to select from any of the available units on the waiting list that you got, that you are on. So if you are the #1 household on the 2-bedroom waiting list and you apply and are eligible, you will then work with the leasing office and be given the option to reserve any of the available 2-bedroom units, whether that unit is ready, that very same day, or if it's a unit that might be coming online a little bit later in a month or two, that might work better with your schedule. And that is your prerogative to select any of the units that best meet what you need. There is also a priority for households that live and work in Waltham, just like there's a priority for the 2-bedroom units for households that are type 2. These are what we call local preference households. Again, that doesn't mean that if you don't live or work in Waltham or having a kid attending the Waltham schools that you can't or shouldn't apply. It doesn't mean that whatsoever. It just means that there is this priority in the lottery for Waltham local preference households that we have to implement. And again, local preference households are households that live in Waltham, that work in Waltham, or have a child attending the Waltham schools. The one thing that is, and I was talking just a moment ago about households from the waiting list will be able to work with the leasing office to select the unit of their choice. Another point that I want to make on this front is that these affordable units have been pre-selected and pre-approved by both Waltham and the state. So these units are not kind of all tucked away in some corner of the building. They are not identifiable as such. From Bruce, I'll get to you in 1 second. I see your question. They're not identifiable as such to someone just walking down the hallway. They're not all stacked one on top of each other. They're not all kind of the least desirable units by any stretch. So they are interspersed evenly and equally throughout the development and have been approved by some of the authorities involved in this project. Bruce, the email is david@sebhousing.com. And for anyone else tuning in, if you want to shoot me a line when this is over, if you have a question, please feel free to do so. If you do get to lease a unit through this process, it's important that you understand that you do have to remain eligible and you do have to be recertified for eligibility every year. I know that's additional work, but once you've certified once, then any future certification should be a whole lot easier because you know kind of how it works and what to expect, and hopefully will have been sort of tucking away the documents that you need during the year. Sometimes households wonder if they're what would happen to their eligibility if they make a little bit more money. One of the nice things in this program is that there is a cushion, and you can make more money at recertification and still be eligible than you could when you applied initially. So what does that mean specifically? Well, just by way of example, and I'm looking at page 16 of the information packet, when applying today, a one-person household is limited to making $62,450 to be eligible for this program. But 1 year down the road, that same household, if they're recertifying, if we're using today's numbers, they can make up to $87,430 and still be program eligible. So that's, almost exactly a $25,000 increase, which is nice. That means that if you apply and are eligible and are able to reserve and live in one of these units, if during that subsequent year when you're living there, if you get a raise or some more money's coming in, you've got a nice cushion to the tune of almost $25,000 where you would still be eligible for the program. So that's kind of the program application process in a nutshell. Again, I cannot stress enough. Probably the most important thing I could tell you is take a look at the information packet, give it a read through. If you think that you are interested, I really encourage you to apply early so that we can work with you if there's anything that's incomplete. And again, most applications, the vast majority, are not 100% complete on the first try. And you don't want to wait till to the very end to get it in, because you don't want to be scrambling to get stuff. That being said, we understand that things are a little tricky right now. So we will do our very best to work with you and grant exemptions and exceptions where we can. Does anyone have any questions? Anything that I could clarify or expand upon before we end tonight's session?
Hey, David, this is actually Tova, the manager at the Edison.
Hi, Tova.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. I just wanted to let everybody know also, while this process is going on, I know that a lot of people will want to come in and tour.
Yep.
Right now, we are actually, due to the coronavirus, we are not taking any online or any in-person tours at this time. And that will probably change over from now till hopefully when the lottery is drawn. But if anybody is looking to come in at the moment, we are not doing any in-person tours right now. We'll be happy to do any type of online tours or FaceTime or send pictures of the apartments, but we cannot do anything in person at this time.
Okay, so just to quickly repeat that for any households who are watching online, just in case you didn't hear it, due to coronavirus, the property can't do tours right now. They will work with households to provide online tours where possible, and we will be in touch. We will definitely be in touch, Tova, as we get closer to the lottery to see where things stand, and we'll provide an update to all households at that time so they know what to expect.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions? Please feel free to.
Dave, I have a question.
Sure.
So we're going to be mailing our applications to the address that's on the application. That's still a standard good address, right?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I meant to mention that at the beginning. So the question is where to mail the application or how to send it in. As you can imagine, we're all working from home right now. We will be periodically kind of going into the office to check for things like mail. So you stuff to the address in Needham, Hillside Ave. I wouldn't recommend sending anything that needs to be signed for right now or hand delivered, because chances are no one's going to be there, so it's going to end up being returned. Another option, which is actually, frankly, probably the best option right now, is if you have access to a scanner, you can scan and email stuff to info@sebhousing.com. That's also on the first page of the application. But again, if that's not available, and you can fax it as well. But if those are not available to you, sure, you can definitely, send it by hard mail. We just, please just understand that, it's a very, will only be there kind of sporadically, and it's possible it could sit for a few days before someone picks it up.
Correct. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? All right. Well, for everyone who attended, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your interest, and we look forward to working with you. And hope everyone is doing all right, and staying safe out there. And wish you all a great evening.
Thank you, Dave.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care. Okay. Bye-bye. Good night. I'm just looking at the the YouTube, and I'm ready to end this. But Nita, I see you said hello. Did you have a question, or are you just saying hi? Okay, I don't think there's a. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, sure. What's your question? Income and asset info. So your question is it about what the? Yes, you do need to submit. So the question is about income and assets. And does that information need to be submitted? It does, up front. Yeah. So this lottery is it is a full application. So you need to indicate in the application what your income and assets are, and you will also have to provide the documentation itself. The application should guide you through what exactly is required. But yes, that documentation does need to be provided up front. Again, we understand that given the coronavirus pandemic, certain documentation may be very difficult to get right now. Please do your best. If there's something that you absolutely can't get, we will do our best to work with you and see if we can give an exception if something's just not available right now. Any other questions? Okay, I think that's it. So thank you again, everyone, for tuning in, and wish you all a good evening, and we hope that you apply. Thanks. Have a good night.